Greetings, everyone. Sego, Sewa Guego. It's Karen Lewis and Trish Ray again, here for part two of From the Valley to the Simcoe Deed. And on behalf of Jijuna Ungwana Language and Cultural Awareness Month.
Okay. So, Sego Karen, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Okay. The Sego Kentege Ganyangahaga. My limited vocabulary. I'm working on it, people. I'm working on it. So this is part two. This is the struggle for the Simcoe Deed. Because we know that even before the landing in 1784, Captain John had been pressing Haldeman to give him a deed for the land. Unfortunately, it's going to take years to get one. So we're going to tell the story about the struggle for the deed itself, the events leading up to it. So I'll let Karen start us off.
Okay, so from 1784 to 1793, we do not have a lot of correspondence coming from the village in those years, but most of what we do have is letters from Captain John. The letters show his priorities. One of the main priorities was to obtain a deed for the land at the Bay of Quinte. He knew that more and more loyalists would be coming into this area.
So in June 1784, Captain John wrote to Daniel Claus requesting assistance with the new settlement, and in that he included a sketch of the land he wanted for the community, and it outlines a hunting area, and it includes the Bay waters and part of Prince Edward County. We'll be talking during this piece about a lot of sketches and plans and things, and again, the sources can be made available for those who would like to see them.
So in July 1780, Captain John wrote to Daniel Claus about the need for a deed and the pressure to give up land for the settling loyalists. So his letter, you doubtless remember that I have said in a letter to you that we should be glad to have our land measured as soon as possible, for the loyalists would try to get some of our land. It now come to pass as I thought. Major Holland and his son were here yesterday for to get some land from us for loyalists. But I could not spare of any besides that Sir John Johnson and I have fixed the boundaries, etc. Please, sir, to hasten affairs for to help us concerning a charter for our land.
Right. And that's interesting. He's demanding not only a deed, but a survey.
Yeah.
You know, so he knows that there's trouble coming. He knows.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1785, there is a Surveyor General's map of the Bay of Quinte. It's in the Public Record Office in London, and it's one of the earliest representations of the Mohawk village we have on the Bay of Quinte. So in 1785, it's nice to know that there is a village, there's a community, the establishment, because it's only been a year, that is available on a map.
It's appearing on a map. So 1786, there was a description of the land that the Crown wants to reserve for the Mohawks. The description of the land reserved for the Mohawks on the north side of the Bay of Quinte, 1786. A description of the land reserved for the settlement of the Mohawk Nation, situated on the north side of the Bay of Quinte, containing about 12 miles in front and in depth to west boundary of the purchase made by the Crown from Mississauga Nation. Bounded in from on the south by the Bay of Quinte, including a small island called John's Island, which lies opposite the Mohawk village, and on the west by the mouth of the Agawasoga River, now called the Shannon, and the township of Thurlow, and of the east by the mouth of Bowen's Creek and the township of Richmond, and on the north by the west boundary of the purchase made by the Crown from the Mississauga Nation. This is described as the land between the townships of Thurlow to the west and Richmond to the east, about 12 miles across. We can tell from this document that the lands destined to be for the Mohawks will not be as big as desired by Captain John. but it is unlikely that either Captain John or any of his followers knew about this document. This document
In
is just within the government.
Yes,
This, yeah.
yeah, just within the government, and it's interesting because the island known as Captain John's Island, known as John's Island here, should have been part of the land granted. You know,
Mm,
it is mentioned and described and said to be including.
mhm.
And that would have raised an issue about the waters of the bay.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting, just something to remember. In 1787, the townships around the Mohawk lands started to be surveyed and set down in lots and concessions. And this process was started with the neighboring township of Richmond, which was surveyed in 1787, and part of Thurlow surveyed also in 1887. So that what should have been a much larger land base was pared down to the size of a township between two townships. So instead of it being, this is what the Mohawks want, and then the Loyalists, it was, here's what we need for the Loyalists, and what's left over is going to be for the Mohawks. The Mohawk Tract, what becomes the Mohawk Tract, I have not seen any proper survey until June 1820.
Wow.
That's a long time.
Mm.
And remember, Captain John wanted a deed and he wanted a survey.
Mm-hmm.
He in his lifetime, because he died in 1811, he never saw a survey.
You never saw it.
No.
Mm. Okay, so in December 1787, John Collins, the Deputy Surveyor General, reported to Lord Dorchester on the lands for the Mohawks at the Bay of Quinte. And he says a tract of 12 miles fronting on the Bay of Quinte by 15 miles in depth. When Captain John was informed about the boundaries being fixed this way, he was furious. But he now knew that the lands he had expected for his community would be far less than what he felt had been promised. Collins reported, I conferred with Sir John Johnson respecting the boundary to be fixed between the Mohawk settlement and that of the Loyalists, and called twice on Captain John as chief of that village to inform him of the mode of settlement we had agreed on. He being absent, I acquainted his wife, and accordingly proceeded to fix the boundaries, leaving a tract of 12 miles fronting on the Bay of Quinte by 15 miles in depth for the use of the Mohawk settlement. This extensive tract, it appears, is by no means satisfactory to Captain John, who I am informed from good authority has spoke in very threatening terms.
Well, you can imagine we have even Captain John's sketch, right, from
Yeah,
1784 of what he wanted, and he's going to end up getting far, far less. And in fact, it's going to be even less than what they've just described in this.
oh,
That's coming. That's coming. Wait for it.
little
On the 21st of April, 1788, Sir John Johnson wrote to Captain John to explain that considerations of the Loyalists came first. Yeah.
night.
And granting the Mohawk land all the way to the Napanee River would be injuring Loyalist settlements. So the eastern boundary had to be moved further west. This is that now we know what the priority of the new governing people is. Settle the Loyalists first.
Right.
Yeah.
So 1791, the Constitutional Act, creation of Upper and Lower Canada, creation of a governing system for Upper Canada. The claims for lands by the Mohawks at the Bay of Quinte were considered by this new government. And the draft minutes of a meeting state that the townships of Richmond and Thurlow had been surveyed in 1787. The land in question is only the land that remains between.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the 24th of December, 1791, we have a report of a committee investigating Indian claims, and the committee decided, quote, that an act of the provincial legislature or a grant under the Great Seal of the province be made in favor of the principal chiefs in behalf of their nation or persons in trust for them forever. Well, at least there is a decision that they are going to go ahead with the granting. So that's 1791. So, everybody's still waiting. It's
Right.
been several years and people are still waiting.
Yeah. So 27th of March, 1793, Surveyor General D.W. Smith was sent a plan of the lands at the Bay of Quinte and was requested to make a copy of the Indian grant, northern boundary to remain blank in the plan.
The
Why
27th.
for?
I think there was a problem with them estimating it or promising it to be 15 miles deep.
Okay.
Okay. And maybe they wanted a nice, neat, tidy township instead of it being deeper than the townships on either side.
Right.
So on the 29th of March, 1793, Surveyor General D.W. Smith submitted, quote, a report on lands reserved for the Mohawks at the Bay of Quinte, close quote. And the northern boundary of the tract was described. It was not the 15 miles in depth as stated in 1787, but rather 13 miles in depth, linked to the northeast angle of the township of Thurlow. So here's what they're doing again. We're not going to have, even though we've said it's going to be 15 miles deep. Oh, no, can't do that because Thurlow isn't.
With nice straight lines on our map.
Hmm.
Oh boy. So 1st of April, 1793, minutes of council, Navy Hall, County of Lincoln. Captain John and Captain Isaac Hill attend this meeting. Captain John, Captain Isaac Hill, and Captain Aaron Hill had petitioned for lands as captains were entitled to. These petitions were granted. And at this meeting, it was resolved that the description of land for the Mohawks of Bay of Quinte previously agreed to be adopted, and that a grant be made under the Great Seal of the province in favor of the principal chiefs on behalf of their nations or tribe as above mentioned, or persons in trust for them forever. And the northern boundary of the land was confirmed. The dimensions of the tract were supposed to be about 12 miles in front and 13 miles back, but there was no instruction to have this tract surveyed at this time. There was no survey reporting the actual width of the tract until 1820, and it was not 12 miles across. Our best estimate is about 10.21 miles. The land goes back to the 9th and 10th concessions. The northern boundary is just before Roslyn in Hungerford Township, where Tynedega Township meets Hungerford. Chisholm's Mills is also on the northern boundary on the Tynedega side.
Right. So there's all the limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And when they talk about making an agreement, you can bet that Captain John, Captain Isaac Hill, and Captain Aaron Hill were not in the room, right?
No. We've agreed among us that this is what they will get.
Yes. Okay, so the 1st of April, 1793 is the date of the Simcoe Deed. Now, we don't have any copy of the Simcoe Deed actually dated the 1st of April, 1793. The earliest one that we have is a later copy that says it's from the original, dated the 29th of December, 1809. Now, it could be that there was nothing printed, actually a physical document until 1809. That's possible, but
Okay.
we don't know. We don't even know when the community received a copy of the deed. But we do know that sometime before June 1816, the community did have a copy. But in June 1816, it was reported missing, and it was thought that Peter John, the son of Captain John, had taken it to York. And that document, I don't know if it ever comes back, because Peter John eventually goes to Grand River and marries a woman from Grand River and does not come back to the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. So where that document is, who knows? Somewhere out there.
So the Simcoe Deed has been called the Simcoe Deed or Simcoe Grant because it was done under the authority of the Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, John Graves Simcoe. And when it was placed into a set of treaties and surrenders, it was assigned the number 3.5. In the publication, Indian Treaties and Surrenders from 1680 to 1890, 2 volumes. Ottawa, printed by Brown Chamberlain, printer to the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, 1891. Facsimile edition, reprinted, Toronto, Coles, 1971. Pages 7 to 8, it is called Treaty 3.5. The only other one like it is a sister document for the lands at Grand River. There's no signature of anyone representing the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte or the Six Nations on the document. The library did hold that publication. I'm not sure they still do. I think sometimes things get lent and don't return. Something like a copy of the Simcoe Deed, maybe. But
And it did get reprinted again.
did it?
Yeah.
Well, I think you can still
By
get it.
Fifth House Publishers. So
Okay.
the Treaties and Surrenders in 3 volumes. Right.
Yes, we did have those, whether we do or not. Still, I don't know.
Anyway, we do, and if somebody wants to see that particular version of the Simcoe Deed, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So this instrument sets apart this land as a homeland to the chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the Six Nations, and their heirs forever. Now, that's an interesting point because it's not just to the chiefs. Whereas earlier they said it was going to be for the chiefs, and no, it's been expanded. Chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the Six Nations and their heirs forever. That land comes to be known as the Mohawk Tract. And it is the home of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. But we've already discussed that they weren't all Mohawks. There were Delawares, there were people of other nations. Okay, sorry about that, technical difficulties. Going back to the idea of it being the Mohawk Tract, and that it was a home for the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. The ancestors of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte were the Fort Hunter Mohawks and those who came with them, and those who came to join them afterwards. And you've got to remember that Captain Isaac Hill originally wasn't part of the community, came later. Old John Green did the same thing. People did go back and forth. So not set in stone who those people are.
Okay.
The other thing to remember about this treaty is that it is not one of those land treaties that takes land away. It's a deed or grant of land. So it's actually it was a land grant. So later on you have the huge treaties, the Robinson Huron, Robinson Superior, and the numbered treaties, where huge bits of land were taken and reserves were set up. In our instance, in this instance, you've had the Crawford Purchase, which was the big surrender of land, but then you have this land grant for the Mohawks, it's very specific. The Simcoe Deed, the land is granted for a special reason.
Okay, so here's another part of the words within the deed. Know ye that whereas the attachment and fidelity of the chief warriors and people of the Six Nations to us and our government have been made manifest on divers occasions by their spirited and zealous exertions, and by the bravery of their conduct, and we being desirous of showing our approbation of the same, and in recompense of the losses they may have sustained, of providing a convenient tract of land under our protection for a safe and comfortable retreat for them and their posterity, have of our special grace certain knowledge and mere motion given, and by these presents do give and grant.
Okay, so it harkens back to Carleton's promise of restoration or recompense for losses, and Haldeman's promise. So it's not in a vacuum. It's actually done for a reason. Mm-hmm. So the Simcoe Deed says, the land is granted to them, the chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations, and to have for the use and behoof of them and their heirs forever freely and clearly of and from all manner of rents, fines, or services, giving and granting, and by these presents confirming to the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations, and their heirs the full and entire possession, use, benefit, and advantage of the said district or territory of land, to be held and enjoyed by them in the most free and ample manner, and according to the several customs and usages by them, the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations, of securing to them the free and undisturbed possession and enjoyment of the same. I always find it nice when it says according to the several customs, because it's not just a grant of land, it's sort of like it's a grant of land to a community to do what they have done before. A bit of continuity.
Yes, an acknowledgement. And so included, it says with a protection against alienation. So the words say, it is our royal will and pleasure that no transfer, alienation, conveyance, sale, gift, exchange, lease, property, or possession shall at any time be had made or given of the said district or territory, or any part or parcel thereof, by any of the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations to any other nation or body of people, person, or persons whatsoever, other than among themselves, the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations. But that any such transfer, alienation, conveyance, sale, gift, exchange, lease, or possessions shall be null and void and of no effect whatever, and that no person or persons shall possess or occupy the said district or territory or any part or parcel thereof by or under pretense of any such alienation or conveyance as aforesaid, or by or under any pretense whatever, under pain of our severe displeasure.
And the Simcoe Deed contains protection against trespass, saying, and that in case any person or persons other than the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations shall, under pretense of any such title as aforesaid, presume to possess or occupy the said district or territory, or any part or parcel thereof, that it shall and may be lawful of us, our heirs and successors, at any time hereafter, to enter upon the land so occupied and possessed by any other person or persons other than the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations, and them the said intruders thereof, and therefrom wholly to dispossess and evict, and to resume the same to ourselves, our heirs and successors.
The deed does provide a way for the lands to be surrendered with these words, provided always, nevertheless, that if at any time the said chiefs, warriors, women, and people of the said Six Nations should be inclined to dispose of and surrender their use and interest in the said district or territory, that same shall be so purchased only for us in our name at some public meeting or assembly of the chiefs, warriors, and people of the said Six Nations, to be held for that purpose by the governor, lieutenant governor, or person administering our government in our province of Upper Canada.
So this land under the Simcoe Deed, originally called the Mohawk Tract, and it is not until 1820 that the township is renamed and called Tyendinaga Township. And that happens when the surrender of the land that went through the middle of the territory happens, and the government decides to rename the township. The township was renamed Tyendinaga, probably, we don't know, probably after Chief Joseph Brant, by government officials of Upper Canada. It's very probable that the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte were never asked their opinion. I don't think they would have named it Dr. Joseph Brant, but I think Joseph Brant would have been one Mohawk that government officials would have known. Right?
He was more well known to a larger group, probably.
Yeah.
So it took almost 10 years for the community to get that deed. And without it, who knows what might have happened with this press of loyalists all around. It's a complicated story, but so worthy of reflection. To consider what our ancestors went through, the ordeal of the American Revolution, the forced move from Mohawk Valley, the deprivations at Lachine, and then the establishment of the Mohawk Village on the Bay of Quinte and getting that land grant. And we're still here.
Just this morning, I made a couple of initial notes. So on the one hand, even with the Simcoe Deed and its protections, lands were taken without a surrender. Trenton Pen Lease area, the Culbertson Tract area. Also in the 19th century, outsiders did find a way to intrude on the lands without permission. Sometimes they paid rent and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes they ran taverns and gave alcohol to the Mohawks to have them sign leases to, for more land to be occupied by squatters. So oftentimes the government did not live up to the terms of the deed. And having those illegal leases and those people living on the territory had a profound impact. And the missionary, Saltern Givens, he probably would have said it was a profoundly negative impact. You had he was ambivalent about having whites so close to the Mohawks. He found if you had good whites with a good model, right, hardworking farmers, that's okay. But people in a tavern, not a good role model. But on the other hand, without the Simcoe Deed, I think it's probably likely that the entire tract would have been lost. We know that as early as 1818, the government of Upper Canada was focused on getting the entire Mohawk tract away from the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte for settlement by loyalists and others. So if not for the Simcoe Deed, at some point after 1818, the people of the community probably would have been forcibly removed to Grand River. That was the plan. Let's get the Mohawk tract, let's move them all to Grand River. That didn't happen, and you're still here. So that's the end of part 2. For those interested, the sources can be provided. Copies of the sketches and plans that we referred to can be made available. I'd like to say Nyawagoa to everyone at TTO for the invitation to do the presentations. Special thanks to Tina, and special thanks to Karen for co-hosting and stopping me from droning on and on. History can feel really distant. It can feel like it's another place, another time, another world. But maybe if you turn it into a conversation and you share ideas between people, you make it personal and you make it accessible. At least that's what we hope. And there's one thing about Kentege and MBQ. You got a ton of history, folks. Ton of history. You are history rich. and thanks again.
Okay, thanks a lot, Trish.